So the follow-up to the Nintendo Switch has been officially announced by Nintendo. And as of right now, Nintendo hasn't mentioned any new features, but did you catch that? That there is a very interesting bit of the Nintendo Switch 2 trailer that has me very excited. What we have is a couple controllers running across a table, and oh boy, those controllers look a little bit mouse-like. Now it's been rumored that these little Joy-Cons are going to have something new on the bottom of them. Now this is just a normal Switch Joy-Con, and as you can see on the bottom, there's not really much going on. A couple buttons, maybe a little sync button, but on the Nintendo Switch 2, it is being rumored that there is an extra little bit. Now if you're not aware, optical sensors are the piece of a computer mouse that makes the cursor be able to move up and down on the screen. The idea seems to be that if you take a Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Con and you put it on the table like a little mouse, you should be able to move it around, and using the L or R buttons as two mouse buttons, you should be able to control a mouse cursor on your Nintendo Switch 2. Or so goes the rumors. Now, obviously, this is all speculative. I mean, they do look like mice. I'm just going to say, they do look a lot like mice, but it's still very speculative. But nonetheless, my game developer imagination has been tingling. So if I'm playing a game on my gamepad, in this case, my Switch, and I want to turn to the left, there is a distinct cap at how fast I can do that, because I can't make it too sensitive or else I'm not going to be able to aim when things are close. But if it's not sensitive enough, it takes forever to turn around. Now, on the PC, we don't have that problem. Functionally, you can move a mouse as quickly or as slowly as you need to. It's a much more granular way of controlling a game. And this is pretty well known. If you take any old competitive game that is both on console and computer and look at the professionals, say grand finals of Apex Legends, you will notice all of them are using mouse and keyboard. There might be some situations in which a controller is preferable. I know in Warzone there's an argument as to whether controller is better than mouse and keyboard. But at the end of the day, I will say in developer circles, it's generally accepted that if you're going to make an FPS and you're going to have crossplay between controller and PC, you're going to have to do something to make sure the PC players are not playing with a massive advantage. But nonetheless, I do think that the idea of some games being inherently not correct without the granular movement of a mouse could very well change what genres could be coming to Switch 2 and have them feel right. One of the reasons that Modern Warfare became as popular as it was is because it was introducing this brand new way of essentially aiming. So as your cursor is hovering over a character, it'll tend to keep looking at them as they move without you even moving the control stick. And indeed, this is a crazy one. I'll bet you've never noticed this before, but as you're turning over an enemy, it will slow down your turning speed to make it easier to stop on that enemy. It only does this with gamepad. This never happens with mouse and keyboard. But there are other ways that developers try to compensate for gamepad being a more difficult way to aim by using these sort of techniques to make it a little bit more automated for the player. If you're into your gaming history, you might remember that the game that popularized many of these techniques was the original Halo. That's one of the reasons it was so exciting, because you have a console shooter that is starting to feel like the shooters that were already on the PC. Now, do I think that this controller, being used like this, is going to act like a mouse in such a way that suddenly FPS games can become the new standard on Switch 2 and console gamers and PC gamers alike can hold hands and be merry together? No, even if it functions like a mouse, I don't think it's going to be a mouse. It's going to be hard to have all of your buttons close by. Trying to push the face buttons might feel a little weird. Might even be a little bit straining on the hands because it's a small controller. Not super ergonomic, perhaps. But nonetheless, the idea that some games function better with this type of control scheme rather than this type of control scheme has gotten me thinking about genres that have been functionally lost to time that never really got the same amount of focus on consoles. This is a strange little division that I've seen, but the online discourse of old PC games and discourse of old console games seem to be just separated. I don't really see many people that have interest in both. It seems that some people grew up with consoles and some people grew up playing games on PC, and there wasn't a lot of intersection, at least not in what people remember fondly. But I happen to be somebody that grew up playing actually more PC games in my early childhood than I did a console. I didn't have a console until I was, maybe 10. We got a GameCube and then we got a Wii, and that was about it. A lot of the other things that I played were all PC. Even at that though, there are large sets of genres of games that were around before I would be, let's say, able to play them, that I never got to experience, that kind of just died. End of video! Things like King's Quest, Monkey Island, even in early indie game development, Machinarium, Samarast, games like that were extremely popular on early PCs, and just kinda aren't anymore. Also, notably, things like edutainment games have fallen off the face of the earth. And yeah, there are educational apps, but they're not the same. Anybody with young children know that they don't really mimic what those original point-and-click educational games did.
C. Little C. What begins with C? Camel on the ceiling. C, C, C.
And yes, there are games that pop up here and there, mostly indie games that kind of have similar formats. This Game Doesn't Exist comes to mind, and quite honestly, I think those games would make fantastic ports to the Switch too. But as a whole, this entire large, important, beloved even genre of games just kinda doesn't exist. The thing is, when a developer is coming into looking at making a game, it's not just about what they want to make. It's not just about what they love, it's also about what's practical. And sometimes having the hardware in front of you, or more importantly, in front of your users, is the bit of practicality that's needed for a developer to actually invest into a project that they want to make. All this to say though, the opportunity to have a mouse controller built into your system might be the impetus that makes developers want to pursue projects like point-and-click adventures. Okay, yeah, they kind of work on gamepad. They're meant for mouse. We have RTSs, which, quite frankly, have struggled to find any sort of a footing on console. We have dungeon crawlers and hardcore RPGs, which have found a bit of footing, but generally seem to have as much player base on PC as all the consoles combined. We've got the weird experimental games like Hypnospace Outlaw. What about the simulators? Okay, yes, again, you can find simulators on console, but think about when simulators were at their best and most popular. What about Roller Coaster Tycoon? That is a genre that has continued to find great success on PC and struggles on consoles. And why do you think that is? It's because of the control scheme. These are all things that just having an optical sensor in your hand, in your user's hand, can really change a lot for. And then, maybe most importantly of all, there is also the opportunity cost of all of the potential games and even full genres that could exist if they had the opportunity to exist. I think that that's getting into a bit of speculation, saying that somebody might want to create something new because they can release it both on console and on PC. Okay, fair enough. Maybe they would just make that game and release it on the PC anyways, and the console wouldn't be part of it. But, you know, there's some interesting other facts about this controller, or let's say potential for this controller, could actually give developers a little bit more than just an optical sensor to bring things to life in ways that maybe mouse and keyboard haven't been able to on their own before. As I was thinking about this, I was thinking, oh yes, making a rail shooter. I like rail shooters. Rail shooters work very well on mouse and keyboard. I mean, rail shooters do not work well on gamepad. So on the Wii, most of the rail shooters, they would just have you drag the controller off to one side, well, in that case, the Wiimote, flick the Wiimote off to one side, and when the cursor was no longer on the screen, the game would say, yep, you reloaded, and then you drag it back on and continue aiming. You know, there's more going on here. We also have all this HD rumble haptic feedback inside of the existing Switch Joy-Cons, and I'd be very surprised if those were not in Switch 2 Joy-Cons. So say you're going to be playing your rail shooter, you flick the controller upward, you reload, and you get this nice little psst to say, oh yeah, you reloaded the gun. Or maybe, you know, you could pipe in one of those sound clips to make it really feel like the slide's going back and the bullets are being loaded in. I guess all I'm saying is there are interesting possibilities. We've got extra buttons, we've got extra joysticks, we've got extra haptic feedback, things that you don't have on a traditional mouse, and quite honestly, those are the sort of things that I think could actually spur into that more abstract direction of what are the possibilities of what this controller could actually be and could actually do. It's very Nintendo, isn't it? Oh wait, you say, I've caught you in my intellectual trap. Did you know, John Szymanski, that you can actually use mouse and keyboard on current gen consoles? And you are right, you can. And in fact, most people don't know that you can, and of those that do know that you can, even fewer do it. And so the question is, do people actually want a mouse and keyboard on their console? Let me say this, I don't know the user base of the Switch. I don't know the user base of most people who are buying consoles, but I would say that the reason that most people don't use their mouse and keyboard on their Xbox or their PlayStation is because it is incredibly inconvenient. And that's why I think having a controller attached to the console that you can just take off and utilize is a much more elegant and much more potentially valuable solution to a developer than just being able to plug in a wireless or wired mouse into your console and be able to use a half-hearted attempt at integrating mouse and keyboard support. I say this because I play Warzone, you know, semi-frequently, and I have tried to play Warzone with mouse and keyboard on my Xbox One, and let me tell you, it is a horrible situation. There is one series that seems to perfectly show this change in design due to change in control structure. So in this case, this old PC franchise called Fallout. Fallout makes two extremely popular games. These games are still very highly revered by people who grew up playing hardcore PC games. And then, at some point, Fallout changes. It changes perspective from this orthographic RPG into this first-person shooter that has open world and RPG elements. You might notice, primarily, one of the things that was done was introducing one of these aiming structures. In this case, it's the VATS system that utilizes the strength of a gamepad much more aggressively than it would the strength of a keyboard and mouse. In this case, you can go into VATS and it'll automatically lock on to individual body parts, and you can kind of choose it in a paused time. So you can take all the time that you need. So at this point, Fallout is probably never going to go back to being an isometric RPG. But the fact that it had to change from being an isometric RPG kind of shows that having the ability to pander to this other control scheme could be a very valuable thing in terms of people being able to create the games that they actually want to create. Not saying people didn't want to create the new FPS Fallout 3 that has open world and RPG elements inside of it. Well, they probably did. But the fact that they really now cannot go back to that is what I find very interesting. So anyhow, these are some thoughts that I've been having concerning the possibility of an optical sensor in the Switch 2. Whether or not that actually happens is up to be seen. I will say they look very mousy. They look very mousy. But even if there's no mouse in the Switch 2, it's still going to be very exciting for me personally as both a developer and a game player, something new to experience. If you have any thoughts of your own, please do feel free to comment them. I am very interested in hearing what you guys think about a potential mouse on the Switch 2 and whether you think that that will be something that could be a benefit or a deficit to the console or do absolutely nothing, like the IR sensor. Poor IR sensor. Yeah, okay, anyway, see you later.